The video uses AI voice images combined with manual editing. All content is fictional and for entertainment purposes only. Wishing you a relaxing listening experience, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any stories. The city of Elias thrummed with a restless energy. It was a place where fortunes were made in steel towers during the day and lost in dimly lit underground clubs at night. For Lily Becker, Elias was just a series of long streets connecting her cramped apartment to the back kitchen of Luigi's, a bustling, mid-tier Italian restaurant. She wasn't the hostess with the blinding smile, nor the server who flirted for tips. She was the pastry chef, hidden away in flour and sugar, constructing delicate sfogliatelle and rich tiramisus. Lily was used to being invisible. Growing up, the cruel nickname, the fat girl no one wanted, had clung to her like a shadow, long after she had shed the awkwardness of adolescence. She had grown into a quiet confidence, possessing a sharp mind and an almost uncanny ability to read a room, even if she rarely spoke in one. She wore her curves proudly now, dressing in vintage clothes that suited her, but society's gaze often passed right over her. She preferred it that way. It allowed her to observe. It was a rainy Tuesday night when the rhythm of Luigi's shattered. The front doors didn't just open, they were commanded open. A hush fell over the dining room as a small group of men entered. At their center was a man who seemed to pull the oxygen from the room. Tommaso Costa. He was a myth whispered about in Elias. Head of the Costa syndicate, he controlled the city's ports and logistics with a grip of iron and ice. He wasn't the stereotypical mobster. He dressed impeccably in tailored suits, his face a mask of aristocratic indifference. His eyes, however, were a startling, cold grey, calculating and empty. He radiated an aura of absolute power and absolute danger. Lily watched from the small porthole window in the kitchen door. The restaurant owner, a sweaty, nervous man named Carlo, practically tripped over himself to seat Tommaso at the best booth. Lily noted the subtle movements of Tommaso's guards, the way they positioned themselves to cover all exits. She also noticed something else. Tommaso looked exhausted. A deep weariness clung to the edges of his perfectly chiseled face. "Get the special ready, Lily," Carlo hissed, bursting into the kitchen. "The boss wants dessert. Make it perfect." Lily didn't rush. She moved with deliberate, practiced grace. She chose a dark chocolate mousse, infusing it with a hint of chili and espresso, a complex, bitter-sweet combination that wasn't on the menu. It was a risk, but looking at Tommaso Costa, she felt he needed something that would wake him up, something unexpected. When she carried the tray out herself, the server was too terrified. She kept her eyes downcast, a protective habit. She placed the delicate plate before him. "What is this?" Tommaso's voice was a low rumble, devoid of inflection. "Dark chocolate with espresso and chili," Lily said quietly, finally meeting his gaze. For a second, the grey ice in his eyes flickered. He wasn't used to people looking directly at him. "It's bracing." He didn't speak. He took a small bite. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. He chewed slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he put the spoon down and looked back at her. "Who are you?" he asked. "Lily, the pastry chef." Tommaso studied her. He saw the flour dusting her cheek, the intelligent spark in her brown eyes, the quiet strength that didn't flinch under his scrutiny. He saw past the invisible girl to the woman underneath. "It is adequate," he finally said, though the slight softening of his jaw betrayed him. Lily offered a small, polite nod and turned to walk away. She had taken 3 steps when a sharp commotion erupted near the entrance. 3 men burst through the doors, weapons drawn. Lily didn't scream. Her mind, always analyzing, calculated the fastest route to cover. But before she could move, a heavy, solid force tackled her to the ground, shielding her body with his own. The scent of expensive cologne and gun smoke filled her senses. It was Tommaso. As the first shots rang out, shattering the tranquility of the restaurant, Lily realized her invisible life was over. The deafening crack of gunfire still echoed in Lily's ears, long after the chaotic scene at Luigi's had dissolved into a blur of sirens and flashing lights. She sat on the cold metal bumper of an ambulance, a shock blanket draped around her shoulders. She was physically unharmed, thanks entirely to the man currently speaking quietly to a police captain a few feet away. Tommaso Costa looked entirely unruffled. His suit was pristine, save for a small tear near the shoulder, and his demeanor was terrifyingly calm. The assassins, rival gang members, she gathered from the whispered conversations, were gone, either dead or fled. The restaurant was a wreck of shattered glass and splintered wood. Lily watched him. Why had he saved her? He was a man who dealt in calculated risks and cold equations. Throwing himself over a pastry chef didn't fit the profile of a ruthless syndicate boss. Tommaso finished his conversation and turned. His grey eyes swept the scene before landing on her. He walked over, his movements predatory and silent. "You are uninjured," he stated. "It wasn't a question." "I am, thank you," Lily replied, her voice remarkably steady, despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "You saved my life." "You were in the line of fire. It was a tactical necessity," he said, his tone dismissive. Yet he lingered. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small, pristine white card. "If you need anything." "A settlement for the trauma, perhaps?" Lily took the card. It bore only a phone number. No name, no title. She looked from the card to him. "I don't need your money, Mr. Costa." He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his features. People always wanted his money, or they wanted to avoid it entirely. "I need my job back," she continued. "Carlo is terrified. He's closing the restaurant. I need to work." Tommaso stared at her. She wasn't hysterical. She wasn't demanding a fortune. She was practical. It was a trait he rarely encountered. He found himself inexplicably intrigued. "Carlo will reopen. I will ensure it," Tommaso said smoothly. "And he will double your salary. I don't want a handout. I want to earn it." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his lips. "You are stubborn, Lily." "I am pragmatic." He nodded once, a brief acknowledgement. "Very well. Good night." He turned and walked toward a waiting black SUV, his guards flanking him. Lily watched him go, the small card heavy in her hand. She thought that was the end of it, a bizarre intersection of two vastly different worlds. But a week later, Luigi's was indeed reopened, fully renovated, and Carlo was treating her with a newfound, almost reverent respect. And every Tuesday night, precisely at 8 p.m., Tommaso Costa walked through the doors. He didn't order from the menu. He simply asked for Lily's choice. She made him intricate, unexpected desserts, rosemary-infused panna cotta, lemon basil tarts. Each time he ate in silence, offered a curt nod, and left. They never spoke more than a few words. Yet a strange, silent routine developed. Lily found herself anticipating Tuesdays. She began studying his subtle reactions, a slight tightening of his jaw if a flavor was too sweet, a brief relaxation of his shoulders if he enjoyed it. She was learning to read the myth. Then came the Tuesday he didn't show up. Lily waited until midnight, a feeling of unease settling in her stomach. The next morning, the news broke. A massive explosion at a warehouse district controlled by the Costa syndicate. Rumors swirled of heavy casualties. Rumors swirled that Tommaso Costa was missing. Lily stood in the kitchen, a tray of untouched eclairs before her. The feeling of unease blossomed into genuine fear. She reached into her apron pocket, her fingers brushing against the crisp white card she had kept for a month. Without overthinking it, she dialed the number. It rang once, twice. "Speak," a gravelly voice answered, not Tommaso. "I need to know if he's alive," Lily said, her voice shaking slightly. There was a long pause. "Who is this?" "Lily, the pastry chef." Another pause, longer this time. "He's alive, barely. And he's asking for you." The car ride to the Costa estate was a blur of tinted windows and anxious silence. Lily sat in the back of a black sedan, flanked by two men whose sheer size made the spacious interior feel claustrophobic. She clutched her handbag, her mind racing. Why would Tommaso Costa, a man who possessed everything and trusted no one, ask for a pastry chef while clinging to life? The estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion. High stone walls, iron gates, and an array of security cameras guarded a sprawling, modern architectural marvel nestled in the hills overlooking Elias. Lily was ushered through echoing halls of marble and glass, the opulent surroundings feeling cold and sterile. She was led to a massive bedroom, currently functioning as a high-tech medical ward. Monitors beeped steadily. And there, in the center of a huge bed, lay the myth himself. Tommaso looked smaller, stripped of his impeccably tailored armor. His chest was heavily bandaged, a stark white against his pale skin. An IV dripped clear liquid into his arm. His grey eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. A sharp-featured woman in a pristine white coat stood near the monitors. "He's stabilized, but the next 24 hours are critical," she told the guards, before turning to Lily. "He woke up briefly. He demanded you be brought here. I don't know why, but we indulge him." Lily approached the bed hesitantly. He looked vulnerable, a word she never thought she'd associate with Tommaso Costa. "Mr. Costa?" she whispered. His eyes fluttered open. The cold, calculating stare was replaced by a clouded haze of pain, but they focused on her with surprising intensity. "Lily." His voice was barely a rasp. "I'm here. Why did you ask for me?" He grimaced, attempting a small, bitter smile. "Because you don't want anything from me." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truth. In his world of sycophants, rivals, and enemies, she was the only anomaly. A woman who had refused his money, demanded her job back, and served him dessert with quiet defiance. She was the only person he felt he could trust not to use his weakness against him. "You need to rest," Lily said, her voice softening, stepping into a role she hadn't anticipated. "They think I'm weak now," he murmured, his eyes darting to the door. "The syndicate. It will fracture. Let them think what they want. You focus on breathing." For the next 3 days, Lily didn't leave the estate. She was given a guest room and access to the massive, state-of-the-art kitchen. She found solace in baking, creating simple, comforting foods, clear broths, soft breads, trying to tempt him to eat when he was awake. It was during these quiet moments, feeding him spoonfuls of soup, that the walls between them began to crack. She learned that the explosion was an inside job, a betrayal by a trusted lieutenant. She saw the simmering anger beneath his stoic exterior, and surprisingly, she saw the heavy burden of leadership he carried. "It is a solitary life," he confessed one evening, his voice stronger now. He was sitting up, watching her methodically peel an apple. "Everyone is waiting for you to fail. It doesn't have to be solitary," Lily said gently, handing him a slice. "You just have to choose the right people." Tommaso looked at her, his grey eyes searching hers. "I am not a good man, Lily. The things I've done—" "I know who you are," she interrupted softly. but I also know the man who took a bullet meant for me." He didn't reply, but the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. A fragile bond was forming, built on shared vulnerability in the shadow of violence. By the end of the week, Tommaso was walking, his recovery fueled by sheer willpower and, perhaps, the quiet presence of the woman who refused to be intimidated by him. The syndicate was stabilizing. His lieutenants had rallied under the swift, brutal orders he issued from his bed. It was time for Lily to go. She packed her small bag, a profound sense of loss echoing in her chest. She had become accustomed to the quiet intensity of his gaze, the unexpected intellectual conversations they shared late at night. Tommaso met her in the grand foyer. He was dressed in a suit again, though he moved stiffly. The mask of the boss was slipping back into place. "Your driver is waiting," he said formally. "A substantial sum has been deposited into your account for your time." Lily froze. The warmth of the past week vanished, replaced by the chilling reality of his world. He was paying her off. A transaction. "I didn't do this for money, Tommaso," she said, her voice tight. She used his first name for the first time. He flinched slightly. "It is how things are done, Lily. You must accept it." She looked at him, realizing the chasm between their worlds was wider than she thought. She had seen the man, but he was choosing to be the myth. "Keep your money," she said quietly. She turned and walked out the door, the heavy oak clicking shut behind her. Tommaso watched her go, a cold knot tightening in his chest. He had pushed her away to protect her, but as the silence of the massive estate descended upon him, he realized he had never felt so entirely alone. And then his phone rang. A private number. He answered. "Costa, we missed you at the warehouse, Tommaso." A distorted, mocking voice sneered. "But we won't miss the pastry chef. She just got into a car, didn't she?" The blood drained from Tommaso's face. The distorted voice on the phone crackled with cruel amusement. "If you want her alive, Costa, you'll come to the old rail yard. Alone. No guards, no weapons. Or the next explosion you hear will be her car." The line went dead. Tommaso didn't hesitate. He ignored the searing pain in his healing chest and sprinted toward the garage, barking orders into his comms unit. He wasn't going to follow the anonymous caller's rules. That was a death sentence. But he needed his men to secure the perimeter while he went in. Meanwhile, Lily's car had barely left the estate's winding driveway when the black SUV slammed into them from the side. The impact was brutal. Lily's head slammed against the window, the world spinning in a kaleidoscope of shattered glass and shrieking metal. When her vision cleared, her driver was slumped over the wheel, unconscious. Before she could process what was happening, the passenger door was ripped open. Two men, masked and armed, hauled her out into the cold night air. "Keep quiet, sweetheart, and you might live," one of them snarled, shoving her roughly into the back of their vehicle. Fear threatened to paralyze her, but Lily forced herself to breathe. She was not a helpless victim. She analyzed her surroundings. Two men in the front, her in the back. The car reeked of cheap cigarettes and stale coffee. They were moving fast, turning onto industrial roads. The old rail yard. She remembered hearing about it. Abandoned, isolated. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady. The driver laughed harshly. "Your leverage, lady. Costa's weakness. The whole city thinks he's a machine, but someone saw him mooning over you in that hospital bed. You're his soft spot." Lily's heart pounded. Soft spot. Tommaso had tried to push her away, tried to pay her off, to distance himself. He had known this was a possibility. He had been trying to protect her, not dismiss her. They arrived at the rail yard, a desolate landscape of rusted train cars and overgrown tracks. They dragged her into a cavernous, empty warehouse, tying her firmly to a heavy metal chair in the center of the room. "Now we wait," the leader said, checking his watch. They didn't have to wait long. The heavy metal doors at the far end of the warehouse groaned open. A single figure stood, silhouetted against the dim moonlight. Tommaso. He walked in slowly, his hands empty, raised slightly to show he was unarmed. But the aura of danger surrounding him was palpable. It filled the massive space, suffocating and cold. "Let her go," Tommaso said, his voice echoing off the metal walls. It wasn't a request. It was an absolute command. The leader scoffed, stepping forward, his gun aimed at Lily. "You're in no position to give orders, Costa. You surrender your territory on the east side, or she dies." Tommaso didn't look at the man. His grey eyes were locked on Lily. He saw the bruise forming on her forehead, the fear tightly controlled in her posture. He felt a rage unlike anything he had ever experienced, a hot, consuming fire entirely different from his usual cold calculation. "You miscalculated," Tommaso said softly. "What?" the leader sneered. "You assumed I would come alone." At that exact moment, the high windows of the warehouse shattered. Ropes dropped, and black-clad figures descended with terrifying speed. Tommaso's tactical team. Chaos erupted. Gunfire deafened Lily. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the worst. But within seconds, it was over. The two kidnappers lay on the floor, neutralized. Tommaso was beside her instantly, his hands expertly untying the ropes. His touch was frantic, urgent. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice thick with emotion he usually kept buried. "I'm okay," Lily breathed, rubbing her raw wrists. She looked up at him, seeing the raw fear in his eyes. He wasn't the untouchable boss in this moment. He was a man terrified of losing something precious. He pulled her up and, without a word, crushed her against his chest. It was a desperate, fierce embrace. Lily buried her face in his jacket, smelling gunpowder and his familiar cologne. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. "I tried to push you away," he whispered into her hair, his voice rough. "I thought it would keep you safe." "I'm not a fragile thing, Tommaso," she replied, pulling back slightly to look at him. "I survived my whole life being invisible. I can survive being seen." He cupped her face, his thumb gently brushing the bruise on her forehead. The cold grey of his eyes was entirely melted, replaced by a profound, terrifying vulnerability. "You are not invisible to me, Lily," he said softly. "You are all I see." He leaned in, and their lips met. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was a collision of relief, fear, and a sudden, undeniable passion that had been simmering beneath the surface since the night he tasted her bitter-sweet chocolate mousse. But the moment was abruptly broken by the sharp crackle of a radio from one of the downed kidnappers. "Boss? Boss, we have a problem," a voice squawked. "The police! They're everywhere! It's a raid!" Tommaso pulled back, the mask slamming back into place. He looked toward the open warehouse doors. Red and blue lights were already flashing against the rusted metal. "We have to move," he commanded, pulling her toward a side exit. But as they ran, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger hadn't been the kidnappers, but the sudden, terrifying realization of what she now meant to Tommaso Costa. The escape from the rail yard was a masterpiece of orchestrated chaos. Tommaso's men engaged the incoming police in a careful, non-lethal distraction, while he pulled Lily through a hidden maintenance tunnel that led to a secondary extraction point. The cold, damp air of the tunnel was a stark contrast to the heat of the moment before. When they emerged, a sleek, unmarked sedan was waiting. Tommaso shoved her inside and slid in beside her, the engine roaring to life before the door was even fully closed. The drive was silent, tense. Lily stared out the window, watching the city lights smear into long, colorful lines. The kiss still tingled on her lips, a confusing mixture of adrenaline and something deeper, something terrifyingly real. They didn't go back to his sprawling estate. Instead, the car wound its way to a hyper-modern penthouse in the heart of the financial district. It was a safe house, devoid of personal touches, functioning purely on extreme security and cold luxury. "You will stay here," Tommaso said, his voice back to its usual controlled baritone as they entered. "It is secure. You have everything you need." "For how long?" Lily asked, wrapping her arms around herself. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold exhaustion in its wake. "Until I neutralize the threat. The men tonight were foot soldiers. I need to find who gave the order." He paced the expansive living room, his mind already calculating 10 moves ahead. "And then what?" Lily pressed. "I just go back to baking cakes like none of this happened?" Tommaso stopped and looked at her. The vulnerability he'd shown in the warehouse was locked away, replaced by the calculating syndicate boss. "You go back to your life. Safe. Protected." Lily felt a flare of anger. "You don't get to dictate my life, Tommaso. You pulled me into this." "I saved you," he snapped, his voice echoing in the large room. "You saved me from a situation you created by existing," she shot back, matching his volume. "You think putting me in a glass box makes me safe? It just makes me a target in waiting." They glared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut. Then Tommaso sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. The weariness she'd seen that first night at Luigi's returned. "You are right," he admitted softly. "I cannot guarantee your safety anywhere." "Not anymore." He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the glittering city below. "I have enemies, Lily. Powerful people who see kindness as weakness. If they know you matter to me, they will never stop hunting you." Lily walked over to him, standing quietly by his side. "Then don't let them know." He turned his head, a quizzical look on his face. "What do you mean?" "They kidnapped me because they thought I was your weakness," she explained, her analytical mind working. "They saw you looking at me in the hospital. We changed the narrative." Tommaso's eyes narrowed slightly. "How?" "We make them think I'm not a weakness. We make them think I'm an asset. Or better yet, we make them think I'm a threat." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Tommaso's face. It was the smile of a man who suddenly saw a winning strategy in a losing game. "You want to play the game, Lily?" "I want to survive," she corrected him. "And I want you to survive." Over the next few days, the penthouse became a command center. Tommaso didn't hide Lily away. He brought her into his world, explaining the intricate web of alliances, betrayals, and rivalries that governed the Elias underworld. He was surprised by how quickly she grasped the complexities. Her mind, trained to balance delicate ingredients and precise temperatures in the kitchen, easily adapted to balancing power and leverage. They discovered the hit had been ordered by the Moretti family, a rival syndicate trying to capitalize on Tommaso's recent injury. The Morettis were brutal, lacking the calculated restraint Tommaso preferred. "We need to send a message," Tommaso stated one evening, looking over a map of the city's ports. "A precise strike on their most valuable shipment." "No," Lily countered. Tommaso raised an eyebrow. "A strike validates them. It shows you're reacting. You need to humiliate them. Make them look incompetent." She laid out a plan. It didn't involve guns or explosives. It involved manipulating the city's corrupt customs officials, whom Tommaso already controlled, to legally seize the Moretti shipment under the guise of an anonymous tip about hazardous materials. It was clean, untraceable, and financially devastating. Tommaso stared at her, genuinely impressed. You are far more dangerous than you appear, Ms. Becker. Never underestimate the invisible girl, she replied with a small smile. The plan was executed flawlessly. The Moretti family was paralyzed, their funds frozen, their reputation severely damaged, and the underworld began whispering not about Costa's weakness, but about a new, unseen advisor whispering in his ear. They celebrated that night with a simple dinner Lily cooked in the penthouse kitchen. The atmosphere was lighter, the constant tension momentarily eased. As they sat on the sofa, drinking a rare Italian red, Tommaso looked at her. "You belong in this world," he murmured, reaching out to trace the line of her jaw. "No," Lily said softly, leaning into his touch. "I belong with you. There's a difference." He leaned in, the kiss slow and deeply passionate, sealing an unspoken promise. But as his arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, Lily's phone, resting on the coffee table, buzzed. She glanced at it. It was a message from an unknown number. "I know who you are. I know what you did to the Morettis. And I know your real name isn't Lily Becker." Lily stared at the glowing screen, the blood turning to ice in her veins. The warmth of Tommaso's embrace faded, replaced by a chilling dread. "I know your real name isn't Lily Becker." "What is it?" Tommaso asked, feeling the sudden tension in her body. He pulled back, his eyes instantly scanning the room for a physical threat before returning to her face. Lily quickly locked the screen, shoving the phone face down. "Nothing. Just spam." Her voice was a fraction too high, her smile brittle. Tommaso didn't push it, but the calculating look returned to his eyes. He missed nothing. He noted the slight tremble in her hand as she reached for her wine glass. The rest of the evening was strained. Lily was distracted, jumping at shadows. When she finally retreated to the guest bedroom, a charade they still maintained despite the shifting boundaries, she locked the door and pulled out her phone. The message sat there, a digital bomb waiting to detonate. Lily Becker was a carefully constructed identity, built 5 years ago when she fled a life she desperately wanted to forget. Her real name was Elena Rostova. She was the daughter of a prominent, ruthless Russian oligarch who had viewed her as little more than a bargaining chip in his political games. She had been the fat, useless daughter until she discovered her father's illegal arms-dealing operations. When she threatened to expose him, he hadn't hesitated to order her silenced. She had barely escaped, shedding her old life, her wealth, and her name. She had chosen Lily for its simplicity, and baking because it was a precise, controllable science in a chaotic world. Now the past had found her. If her father knew where she was, he would send men far worse than the Morettis. Worse if Tommaso found out she had lied to him, that her very existence brought a massive international threat to his doorstep. What would he do? The foundation of their fragile connection was trust, and she had built it on a lie. The next morning, the atmosphere in the penthouse was thick with unspoken questions. Tommaso was distant, his focus seemingly back on his syndicate. He spent hours on encrypted calls, his face an unreadable mask. "I have to meet with the captains today," he announced, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "We need to solidify our position after the Moretti incident. You will stay here. The security detail has been doubled." "Tommaso," Lily started, her heart pounding. She needed to tell him. She needed to confess before the anonymous sender did it for her. He paused, looking at her through the mirror's reflection. "Yes?" The words died in her throat. She looked at his guarded expression, remembering the cold, ruthless man he was capable of being. If she told him, she risked losing the only person who had ever truly seen her. "Be careful," she managed to say. He offered a curt nod and left. Lily spent the day pacing like a caged animal. She tried to trace the number, using skills she hadn't touched in years, skills she learned hacking her father's servers. But the sender was sophisticated. The number bounced through a dozen proxy servers before disappearing. By evening, the anxiety was suffocating. She needed air. She needed to think outside the sterile confines of the penthouse. Knowing it was reckless, she slipped past the internal security cameras, a flaw she had noticed days ago, and took the service elevator down. She just wanted to walk around the block, to feel the anonymity of the city crowd one last time. She made it 2 blocks before she felt the presence behind her. Not the heavy, obvious tail of syndicate thugs, but a shadow, a professional. She quickened her pace, turning down a narrower street. The footsteps matched hers. Panic flared. She ducked into a small, dimly lit alleyway, pressing herself against the damp brick wall, hoping they would pass. A figure stepped into the mouth of the alley, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark trench coat. "Elena," a thick, accented voice called out softly. "Your father sends his regards." Lily froze. It was Ivan, her father's chief enforcer, a man who enjoyed his work far too much. "I'm not Elena anymore," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt, stepping away from the wall. Ivan chuckled, a sound like grinding stones. "You can change your name, change your face, but you cannot change your blood. He wants you back. You are a loose end." He reached into his coat. Lily knew she couldn't outrun him. She braced herself for the impact, wishing she had told Tommaso the truth, wishing she hadn't been so cowardly. Suddenly, a sleek black car tore into the alley, its headlights blindingly bright. Tires shrieked as it swerved, intentionally pinning Ivan against the brick wall with a sickening crunch. The driver's side door flew open. Tommaso stepped out, a silenced pistol in his hand, his face a mask of absolute, terrifying fury. He didn't look at Lily. He walked toward the pinned, groaning enforcer. "You," Tommaso said, his voice deadly quiet, "have made a very significant error." He raised the gun. "Tommaso, wait!" Lily screamed, stumbling forward. "He works for my father." Tommaso paused, the gun inches from Ivan's head. He turned slowly to look at Lily, his grey eyes colder than she had ever seen them. "Your father?" Tommaso repeated, the words laced with a dangerous edge. "And who exactly is your father, Lily?" The silence in the alley was absolute, broken only by the ragged breathing of the pinned enforcer and the hum of the car engine. Tommaso's eyes, usually a calm, calculating grey, were turbulent storms. He looked at Lily, really looked at her, searching for the woman he thought he knew, and finding a stranger. "Speak," Tommaso commanded, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He didn't lower the gun aimed at Ivan's head. Lily swallowed hard, the truth she had guarded for 5 years, finally tasting like ash in her mouth. "My name is Elena Rostova. My father is Alexei Rostov." Even in the dim light, she saw the slight tightening of Tommaso's jaw. Everyone in the global underworld knew Alexei Rostov. He was a monster, a man who traded in weapons, governments, and lives with equal indifference. To cross Rostov was to invite a war you couldn't win. "You lied to me," Tommaso stated. It wasn't an accusation, it was a devastating fact. "From the very beginning. I was hiding, Tommaso, from him." Lily gestured frantically toward Ivan. "He wanted me dead because I knew too much. I had to become someone else." Tommaso looked from her to the groaning man pinned against the brick. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered the weapon. He stepped back, gesturing for his men, who had materialized from the shadows to secure the enforcer. "Bring him to the warehouse. Get everything he knows," Tommaso ordered his men. his voice devoid of emotion. Then he turned to Lily. "Get in the car." The drive back to the penthouse was agonizing. The silence was heavier than before, thick with betrayal and unspoken anger. Lily stared out the window, tears pricking her eyes, mourning the loss of the fragile trust they had built. She had finally been seen, only to be revealed as a fraud. When they entered the penthouse, Tommaso poured himself a measure of scotch, downing it in one smooth motion. He didn't offer her any. He stood by the window, his back to her, staring out at the city he ruled. "You brought a Russian oligarch's war to my doorstep," he said quietly, the stillness of his posture more terrifying than any outburst. "I didn't mean to," Lily pleaded, stepping closer but afraid to touch him. "I thought I was safe. I thought Lily was invisible." He turned sharply, his eyes flashing with a sudden, intense anger. "You were never invisible, not to me. I let you in, Elena. I let you see the cracks in my armor because I thought you had none of your own. I thought you were the one true thing in a city built on lies." The use of her real name felt like a slap. "I am true. My feelings for you. That wasn't a lie." Tommaso let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Feelings. We are not talking about a high school romance. We are talking about survival. Rostov will not stop. He will send an army, and he will not care who gets in his way to get to you." "Then let me go," Lily said, her voice breaking. It was the hardest thing she had ever said, but she meant it. "I won't let you or your syndicate bleed for my past. Give me a car, some cash, and I'll disappear again." Tommaso stared at her. He saw the resolve in her eyes, the same quiet strength he had admired from the moment she handed him that dessert. She was willing to walk away to protect him. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping inches from her. The anger in his face was warring with something else, a desperate, fierce possessiveness. "Do you think I would let you walk away?" he demanded softly, his voice rough. "Do you think I would let Rostov have you? Tommaso, it's a war you don't need." "I decide what wars I fight," he interrupted, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was tight, almost painful. "You belong to me. Not to your father, not to your past. To me." He kissed her then, a punishing, desperate kiss that tasted of scotch and fear. It was a claim, a violent rejection of the reality threatening to tear them apart. Lily kissed him back with equal desperation, clinging to the lapels of his jacket as if he were her only anchor in a storm. When he finally pulled away, they were both breathless. Tommaso rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "We cannot run from him," Tommaso whispered, the cold strategist returning. "Rostov has endless resources. If we run, we will always be hunted." "Then what do we do?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. Tommaso opened his eyes, the grey ice back, sharper and more lethal than ever. "We do not run. We prepare. If Alexei Rostov wants a war in Elias, I will give him a massacre." He stepped back, already reaching for his phone. "Pack your things, Elena. We are leaving the penthouse. It is no longer secure." Lily turned to go, but paused. "Where are we going?" Tommaso didn't look up from his phone. "To the only place in this city impenetrable enough to withstand a siege." He was taking her to the heart, the hidden, subterranean bunker where the Costa Syndicate was born. But as the elevator doors closed, cutting them off from the glittering city, Lily wondered if they were locking themselves away to survive, or digging their own grave. Because down in the heart, there would be no escape when Rostov's army finally arrived. The heart was not a place of luxury. Deep beneath the industrial district of Elias, it was a brutalist labyrinth of reinforced concrete and steel, originally built as a Cold War fallout shelter. Now It served as the ultimate stronghold for the Costa Syndicate. The air was cold and stale, thrumming with the low vibration of massive generators. For 3 days, they had been sealed inside. Tommaso had recalled his most loyal lieutenants, transforming the bunker into a war room. Maps covered the walls. Communications equipment buzzed incessantly. The atmosphere was a powder keg of tension. Lily felt useless. She was no longer the brilliant strategist from the penthouse. In a war of bullets and brute force, a pastry chef, even a Russian oligarch's daughter, had no place. She was simply the prize being fought over. Tommaso was a different man down here. He was the general, cold, efficient, ruthless. He barely spoke to her, his focus entirely consumed by fortifying their position and trying to intercept Rostov's movements. The soft moments they had shared felt like a lifetime ago. "They're moving," a lieutenant announced suddenly, breaking the heavy silence of the war room. "We've got multiple heavy vehicles approaching the perimeter. Mercenaries, highly equipped." Tommaso leaned over the tactical table, his face a mask of stone. "They are testing our defenses. Let them hit the outer gates. Do not engage until they are within the kill zone." The first explosions shook the bunker a few minutes later. Dust rained down from the concrete ceiling. Lily, sitting in a corner, flinched. The battle for her life had begun. For hours the assault was relentless. The heavy, muffled thuds of artillery above ground were punctuated by sharp crackles of gunfire, echoing through the ventilation shafts. Tommaso directed his men with chilling precision, trading lives for tactical advantage. He was a master of defensive warfare, bleeding the attackers for every inch of ground they tried to take. But Rostov's resources were vast. Wave after wave of mercenaries crashed against the syndicate's defenses. "Boss, they've breached Sector 4, a bloodied guard reported, stumbling into the room. "They're using cutting charges on the blast doors. We can't hold them much longer." Tommaso's jaw tightened. "Fall back to the secondary choke point. Flood Sector 4. He didn't hesitate to drown an entire section of his own bunker to slow the enemy down. It was a terrifying display of his ruthlessness. Lily watched him, realizing she loved a man who was capable of terrible things. But she also realized he was doing these terrible things to protect her. The battle raged into the night. The bunker's systems were failing. Lights flickered. The air filtration system whined in protest. The defenders were exhausted, their numbers dwindling. During a brief lull in the fighting, Tommaso walked over to Lily. His face was smeared with soot and sweat, a stark contrast to his usual pristine appearance. "They will break through, eventually," he stated flatly, sitting heavily beside her. "Rostov does not care how many men he loses." Lily reached out, wiping a smudge of dirt from his cheek. "I'm sorry, Tommaso. I brought this death to your door." He caught her hand, holding it tight. "I chose this war. I do not regret it." He looked at her, his grey eyes blazing with a fierce, possessive fire. "But I will not let him take you. If they breach this room—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung heavy in the air. He would rather kill her himself than let her father drag her back to hell. Lily felt a chill, not of fear, but of profound sorrow. This was the end. They had fought valiantly, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. Suddenly, a loud, static-filled squawk erupted from the main communications terminal. The room fell silent. Tommaso Costa, a smooth, heavily accented voice, filled the war room. It wasn't the voice of a mercenary. It was Alexei Rostov himself. Tommaso walked slowly to the terminal. "Rostov, you fight well for an Italian street thug." Rostov chuckled, the sound chilling. "But you are delaying the inevitable. Send my daughter out, and I will let you and the remnants of your pathetic syndicate live." Tommaso looked at Lily. He saw the terror in her eyes, the silent plea. "She is not your daughter," Tommaso replied, his voice deadly calm. "She is Lily Becker, and she stays with me." A long pause. Then Rostov sighed, a sound of genuine disappointment. "A pity. You had potential, Costa. Very well. Burn them out." The radio went dead. Seconds later, the massive blast doors at the far end of the war room groaned. Sparks showered as plasma cutters began searing through the thick steel. The final breach had begun. Tommaso drew his weapon, checking the magazine. He turned to his remaining men, a mere dozen battered fighters. "We hold the line here. No retreat." He positioned himself squarely in front of Lily, his body a living shield. The screech of the metal grew louder, deafening. The doors glowed red-hot, then white. Lily closed her eyes, preparing for the end. But as the heavy steel doors finally crashed inward in an explosion of smoke and fire, a deafening roar entirely different from gunfire shook the bunker. It sounded like the world tearing itself apart. And through the smoke, it wasn't Russian mercenaries who poured into the room, but a heavily armed tactical squad wearing the insignia of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The war room descended into utter chaos. The FBI SWAT team flooded the space, weapons drawn, lasers painting every surviving syndicate member. "FBI, drop your weapons, drop them now!" the lead agent roared. Tommaso's men hesitated, looking to him for the order to fire. But Tommaso, ever the tactician, saw the unwinnable odds. A gunfight with the feds would be a massacre. He slowly lowered his weapon, placing it on the floor. "Stand down," he commanded his men. Reluctantly, weapons clattered to the concrete. Agents swarmed them, zip-tying wrists and shoving them against the walls. 2 agents grabbed Lily, pulling her roughly away from Tommaso. "Don't touch her," Tommaso snarled, surging forward, only to be slammed against a table by 3 heavily armored agents. "Quiet, Costa." A calm voice cut through the noise. A man in a sharp suit walked through the breached doors, seemingly immune to the dust and tension. He looked at Tommaso, then at Lily. "Agent Harris, FBI Organized Crime Task Force." He turned to Lily. "Elena Rostova, we've been looking for you for a very long time." Lily felt a cold dread sink in. They weren't here to save her. They were here for the prize. "We intercepted the attack on this facility," Harris continued, looking around at the destruction. "Your father made a significant mistake deploying foreign mercenaries on American soil. It gave us the jurisdiction we needed." "Where is he?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "Rostov? Arrested at his private airfield 20 minutes ago," Harris stated flatly, along with a substantial amount of evidence linking him to global arms trafficking. Evidence, I believe, you originally intended to provide us 5 years ago before you disappeared. Lily stared at him. She had tried to go to the authorities back then, but Rostov's reach was too deep. She had panicked and run. "We need you to testify, Elena," Harris said, stepping closer. "With your testimony, we can put him away for life. Without it, his lawyers will have him back in Moscow by next week." "And if I refuse?" she challenged. Harris glanced at Tommaso, who was watching the exchange with cold, calculating eyes despite being restrained. "If you refuse, you are an accessory to his crimes. And Mr. Costa here," Harris gestured vaguely, "faces a litany of charges: RICO, racketeering, murder. He'll never see the outside of a supermax prison. It was a trap, a perfectly laid snare." "Let him go," Lily said quietly, her eyes fixed on Tommaso. "He had nothing to do with my father. I dragged him into this." "That's not how the law works, Miss Rostova," Harris replied. "Let me speak to him," Tommaso demanded, his voice low and hard. 5 minutes, alone. Harris considered this, then nodded. He gestured for his men to clear the immediate area, though they kept their weapons trained on the pair. Tommaso stepped close to Lily. He looked battered, exhausted, but his eyes were clear and intense. "Do not do this," he whispered fiercely. "Do not let them use you, Tommaso. They have my father," she whispered back, tears welling in her eyes. "This is what I wanted. This is how I stop running." "You are trading one cage for another," he hissed. "Witness protection? A life looking over your shoulder? That is not living. It's better than you dying in prison," she cried softly, grabbing his jacket. "Or worse, my father getting free and hunting us down." He touched her face, his thumb wiping a tear from her soot-stained cheek. The hardened syndicate boss was gone, leaving only a man facing the loss of the only thing he truly cared about. "I can fight the charges," he said, though the desperation in his voice betrayed him. "My lawyers will stall, but they won't win against the federal government, Tommaso," she interrupted gently. "This is the only way." She looked into his grey eyes, committing every detail to memory. "You saved my life, Tommaso, more than once. Now it's my turn to save yours." She turned back to Agent Harris before Tommaso could stop her. "I'll testify," she said, her voice ringing clear in the silent bunker. "I'll give you everything you need to bury Alexei Rostov, but on one condition." Harris raised an eyebrow. "You aren't in a position to make demands." "I am the only position you have," Lily countered, channeling the cold authority she had learned from the man beside her. "My testimony for his freedom, total immunity for Tommaso Costa and his syndicate for any actions related to this siege." Harris scoffed. "Impossible. He's a known mob boss." "Then find another way to convict the Russian oligarch," she stated coldly, crossing her arms. The standoff lasted for agonizing seconds. Harris looked at Lily, realizing she was entirely serious. He weighed the value of a mid-level American mob boss against a major international arms dealer. Finally, Harris pulled out his phone. "I have to make a call." He stepped away, speaking in hushed tones. 10 minutes later, he returned. "The immunity covers the events of the past week only," Harris said grimly. "We wiped the slate clean on this incident, but he's still on our radar." "Deal," Lily said immediately. "Elena, no." Tommaso stepped forward, his face etched in agony. "It's done, Tommaso," she said softly, turning to him one last time. She reached up and kissed him, a heart-breaking press of lips, tasting of salt and ending. "Go back to Elias. Rebuild your empire. Forget the invisible girl." Agent stepped forward, guiding Lily away. Tommaso fought against his restraints, roaring her name, a sound of pure, primal loss that echoed off the cold concrete walls of the bunker. But she didn't look back. She walked toward the elevator, stepping out of his world and back into the nightmare she had run from, sacrificing her freedom so he could keep his. 3 years had passed since the siege of the heart. The trial of Alexei Rostov was a global spectacle. Lily, returning to the name Elena Rostova, had been the star witness. Her testimony was cold, precise, and utterly devastating. She dismantled her father's empire piece by piece, document by document, under the harsh glare of international media. When the guilty verdict was read, Alexei Rostov had glared at his daughter with pure hatred. Elena had simply stared back, feeling nothing but a hollow relief. The monster was caged, but her victory came at a cost. She was placed into the highest tier of the witness protection program. She was relocated to a small, quiet town in the Pacific Northwest, given a new name, Sarah Jenkins, and strict instructions never to contact anyone from her past. She opened a small bakery. It wasn't the high-pressure environment of Luigi's, nor the sprawling kitchen of the Costa estate. It was quaint, smelling of cinnamon and yeast, catering to locals who knew nothing of Russian oligarchs or syndicate bosses. She was safe. She was free, and she was profoundly lonely. She followed the news from Elias obsessively in the early days. Tommaso Costa had emerged from the siege stronger than ever. The vacuum left by the weakened Moretti family and the destruction of Rostov's mercenaries allowed him to consolidate power. He was untouchable, a ghost ruling the city from the shadows. But rumors suggested he had changed. He was more ruthless, more isolated. The cold grey eyes, people whispered, had turned to ice. He never took a partner, never showed weakness. Sarah, Elena, would read these reports in the quiet hours before dawn, her heart aching. She had saved him, but she had broken him in the process, and she had broken herself. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the bakery empty save for the rhythmic patter of rain against the window. Sarah was behind the counter, icing a batch of cupcakes, lost in memories she tried so hard to suppress. The bell above the door jingled, signaling a customer. "Just a minute," she called out, not looking up, finishing a delicate swirl of vanilla frosting. "I am in no rush," a deep, familiar baritone replied. Sarah froze. The piping bag slipped from her hand, hitting the counter with a soft splat. Her breath hitched in her throat. She slowly raised her head. He stood in the doorway, shaking the rain from a black umbrella. He wore a dark, tailored coat over a simple sweater. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by a quiet elegance. His hair was slightly longer, touching his collar, and there were faint silver streaks at his temples. But his eyes, those striking, calculating grey eyes, were exactly the same, and they were fixed entirely on her. "Tommaso," she breathed, the name feeling foreign, yet entirely right on her lips. "Hello, Elena," he said softly, stepping into the warm, fragrant air of the bakery. How did you find me?" Panic and joy warred in her chest. "If the marshals know you're here." "They don't," he interrupted calmly. "It took me 3 years, a considerable fortune, and dismantling a very secure federal database, but I found you." He walked slowly toward the counter, stopping just on the other side of the display case. He looked at the array of pastries, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. "You are still baking." "It's what I know," she whispered, unable to look away from him. "Tommaso, you shouldn't be here. It's dangerous for you." "The syndicate is gone, Elena," he said, his voice quiet but firm. She stared at him, stunned. "Gone? What do you mean?" "I dismantled it," he explained, holding her gaze. "Piece by piece over the last 3 years. I legitimized the profitable sectors, sold off the rest, and severed ties with the underworld. Tommaso Costa, the boss, no longer exists." Elena couldn't comprehend it. "Why?" "It was your life." He reached across the counter, his large hand gently covering hers. His touch was warm, sending a jolt of electricity straight to her heart. "Because ruling a city meant nothing without you in it," he said, the vulnerability she had seen in the warehouse returning, unguarded and raw. "You showed me that a life built on fear and isolation is not a life. I spent 3 years tearing down my empire so I could finally be a man worthy of standing in this bakery." Tears blurred Elena's vision. The sacrifices, the pain, the years of lonely exile. It all melted away under the warmth of his touch. "You gave up everything," she choked out. "I gave up a cage," he corrected her, stepping around the counter. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. He smelled of rain and that same familiar cologne. "I found my freedom." Elena wrapped her arms around him, holding on tight. The invisible girl and the ruthless boss were gone. In their place stood 2 people, battered by their pasts, finally ready to build a future together, step by step, recipe by recipe. "I make a very good dark chocolate mousse," she murmured against his chest, a tear slipping down her cheek. Tommaso pulled back slightly, his grey eyes shining with a warmth she had never seen before. He leaned down, capturing her lips in a kiss that tasted of rain, sugar, and the promise of forever. "I know," he whispered. "It is my favorite." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed The Fat Girl No One Wanted, The Mafia Boss's Secret Heart, please consider leaving a like, commenting your favorite part, and subscribing to the channel for more original, emotional stories. Your support allows me to keep creating these new worlds and characters for you. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Until next time, keep reading and keep dreaming.